The sky is falling in. United are finished as a club. Michael Carrick should be sacked as manager. Just some of the takes after yesterday's 2-0 defeat to Hull City. Here to assess it all with Wayne Barton. How's it going, Wayne?
Yeah, it's all very miserable, isn't it? Especially when you see City turn it around late on to win in the way that we were used to doing. And I'm one of those. We spoke about it a few weeks ago, like you got that first page of a new season, everyone can win the league and everything, and we think everything's going to change. And what was it I said on the last podcast? Didn't know if it was the last remnants of the banter era or if it was still in full flow, and it feels very much like I said, the sky's not falling in, but it still feels like we're in the banter era, unfortunately. Some way out of getting there. So, yeah, pretty disappointing. I mean, we're on while Newcastle are playing Liverpool, so hopefully we'll get some rejoice at the end of it. Pretty miserable opening weekend, to be fair.
Yeah, it was. And while we're talking the miserable things, if you want to continue getting this miserable analysis from us, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app or on YouTube. Just have to remember to do that. Yes, look, I did a quick take after the game yesterday, which was basically along the lines of, look, hang on, lads. We lost to 0.07 XG from open play, right? Hull created nothing except from set pieces, and they scored a couple. United had 21 shots, 70% possession, and 40 entries into the Hull box. But for the details, United should have won that game. And I do think that's a reasonable way of thinking about it. But for the details, football's so often won and lost in the details. And that doesn't mean the sky is falling in. It was a bad performance, which we can probably explain in 3 blocks. One, I think, is technical. They just didn't finish the chances they created and didn't create enough good ones. That might be partly tactical. Which is on Michael Carrick. I think he went with the wrong 11 to start with. Dorgu is not a small spaces player, and that was clearly going to be a small spaces game with Hull camped in their own box for much of the game. I think he got that one wrong and tried to rectify it after half-time by stretching the pitch. And physical, some of those players had not very much pre-season. I mean, Bruno had 190 prior to yesterday's game, 190. So he was basically effectively playing his 4th pre-season game today. Hull didn't have anyone at the World Cup and had a full pre-season. They sound like excuses, but I think it's just a more reasonable explanation than that's it. It's all terrible. There's no way Michael Carrick can get results at United, ignoring all the good results he got last season. He should be sacked, and it's all on the owners for not buying the right players and stuff like that. And I think it's just hyperbolic nonsense. We can be really disappointed because it was crap yesterday against a pretty crap team who, my assessment of them coming into it was, I think they'll probably ship 60, 70, 80 goals and get 20 points if they're lucky this season. So, yeah, put it in context. That's why everyone's kind of disappointed. But the need for people to take one result and extrapolate it to something way, way, way bigger, I think is over the top. But maybe that's just me. I'm not usually known as the positive guy,
I'm here to provide that balance for your head because whilst I agree with a lot of what you're saying and the general theme of what you're saying, generally I subscribe to. I really do. But there is a lot to be concerned about. When you're talking about that, you're talking about Hull having a full pre-season, United not having one. I look back at certain times when we were successful, and I think the 07 season, the 08 season, we started fairly slowly in both of those seasons, and we went on to have great seasons. So I think there's a fair point there to be made, but also I think we were playing against Hull City, like I said, widely projected, and it could be wrong. There were projections about Sunderland last season and Brentford that were wildly mistaken.
Yeah.
And to be fair, Hull also have spent a lot and were a pretty much unknown quantity to themselves coming into the game. There are certain elements about this that are, of course, for alarm, and I'll run through a couple. The primary one being, we talked about this. We talked, and different conversations about it. You do a lot of talk about previewing a season at the start of it, and most commonly, people were agreeing that you didn't know what to expect from Hull because of the fact that they bought a lot of players.
They bought a lot of crap players, but
No, they have, but you still don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how it's going to materialise.
Yeah.
And obviously, when you get a lot of individual players in, and they're playing the first game and they've not been there for a long time, they're not tethered to a game plan necessarily. So they're running on energy, they're running on emotion. They've got a lot to prove individually. And sometimes you can get that results in games like yesterday, where Hull weren't particularly outstanding, but what they had man for man was an energy and drive that might be missing in 3 or 4 months' time. And yeah, all right, we caught them on that day, but United should still be prepared for that. What has irked me a little bit is that that's obviously something that United should have been prepared for, right? And you can explain that, and I think there's a caveat to be agreed there, that with the differing fitness standards of the players and the fact that that squad, that team hasn't played together in pre-season yet, that's going to be a bit of an issue. But again, lads, it's Hull City. You've got to expect a little bit better than that. What has really irked me is, your post-match consumption is unfortunately through the media, social media. I was in the Bishop Blaze watching the game yesterday, and I think we'll talk about Rashford a little bit later and the context of me being there, because I think that'll be important. But I felt like the reaction to the performance wasn't quite as hysteric as obviously what you get on social media, but your natural consumption of everything post-match is the United stuff, and then you read the wider pieces. And today I'm reading a lot of Hull reaction to this, and their reaction to United's reaction, which is to say you've had Luke Shaw and Michael Carrick both coming out saying, "Oh well, we know what Hull's strengths were, and we're a bit disappointed." Blah blah blah. They're really strong on set pieces. The Hull's reaction to that has been, "We're rubbish on set pieces. Like, we don't score from set pieces. We're notorious for not scoring from set pieces. So we haven't, you focused on the strength that we don't have." And wrongly, because we were so catastrophic in dealing with it. I think what's happened in there is not that United have, been prepared for something and it happened and United just failed to deal with it. They didn't know what to deal with Hull. If they were preparing for set pieces, then their research is all wrong. But the worst thing about all that was that rather, and I'm not one for, again, we've talked about pre-season, and I think there's something, I don't know if I said this in the last time we spoke about it, which was only a few days ago, but the way that pre-seasons are, obviously it's not a catastrophe when it doesn't work well, but sometimes you can't always determine the way that it will go based on what happens in pre-season. But what you can do is establish a narrative that's hard to shake off. Like I was saying about momentum of performances with some teams. We talk about Guardiola, it's difficult to turn on the switch of like getting that kind of intensity. Well, when you are having lapses in concentration in defence, it's hard to switch that off when the real stuff starts. And I think all Hull City did to prepare was look at United in pre-season and say, well, the lazy on-set plays, that's kind of a theme that has been with them throughout the last sort of 2 or 3 years. If we get a few, just put bodies around and see what happens. You don't need a great tactical plan for that, because that's Route 101 football, and then that's fine because that's part of football these days, and it's always been a part of football, more prominently these days. So the piece that you put up, and you spoke about the 0.07 XG, and I do think it's an important stat because it does put into context the open play nature of the game. But obviously the game is divided into all these certain parts, and set pieces are an increasingly crucial part of that. And now, so United, having apparently prepared for strength that Hull don't have, I think rather Hull have prepared for a weakness, and
apparently do have. So.
Well, yeah, but against United, they don't traditionally have this strength, and now they've demonstrated they might have it this season because of the players that they've signed. But all of Hull's reporters, all of Hull's players, or the management have come out fairly surprised at this, because they, and Hull supporters, we're notoriously bad at set plays. Not just to finish on the point before we move on to the next part of the match, is that having been so easily exposed, you would have thought that there's some kind of different option in there, but a lot of that depends on the lethargy of the players and their ability to pull themselves out of that. And that's obviously where the pre-season mismatching has come back to hurt us, but you still have to prepare better for that, because we can not overreact to this, and I probably am going to be slightly overreacting throughout the process of this podcast, but it's one game of 37. Right, you don't get that game back now. You don't get to go back to Hull, one of the easiest places to go.
Yeah.
And then you're already playing catch up in a certain way. And I don't want to overreact, because I think like that points are won and lost on a lot more even basis these days in the Premier League. But I think if you're giving them away that cheaply this early on, it has to be a concern. It's a hangover from the pre-season. So while we would like to categorise all this and say, like, well, pre-season means nothing because the real business starts now, we're already carrying things in. Like you said, the lethargy, set-piece conceding. If we're showing that kind of vulnerability, that needs to be eradicated now, doesn't it? You know what I mean? They can't go like, oh, we have 1 or 2 more games of doing this. It has to go now.
I think you're probably over-egging the quote from Luke Shaw just a tiny, tiny bit, right? I doubt they spent their entire week focusing on whole set plays. And by the way, if they did it very badly. They don't have a set-piece coach at the moment. They conceded 14 goals from set pieces last season. They also scored quite a lot, right? So it's a strength and a weakness. We've lost Casemiro, who was our best player in those sort of dimensions, right? So it is a problem. Like, set pieces this season, I am concerned about. I think United will concede too many goals there. We didn't deal with either of those that Hull scored from. I mean, the corner was fucking terrible. Had 3 chances to clear and didn't. And then it's an open net. Everyone should be looking at that in the video analysis room this week and going, okay, what happened there, right? Because that was a mess, right? I think those are details you should be able to sort out. That is on the coaches, 100%. They should be able to sort that out. If they can't, there's a big question mark about their ability to do it. The lack of intensity is the thing that I think it sometimes gets called different things. Like fans will call it commitment, or Jan Arga-Fjortoft on Viaplay said it was lack of passion to Michael Carrick. And he pushed back, right? He was angry about that. And I think he's right to be angry because it's fucking reductive, right? Yeah. United are moving to a slightly different style of play and they haven't got there yet. Right, and I did suspect we might have a few problems. Right, we did a tactical breakdown with Darnish. Go check it out. I'll stick the link here, which is to say they're trying to move to a very heavy possession-oriented. They want control. They want less of the scattergun verticality of the Ten Hag and Amorim eras. They want to be able to have multi-phase attacks where, you know, there's a wave of 5, 6, 7 attacks and then they score because they've pinned the opposition back. And it's not quite got there yet. I thought Bruno said an interesting thing after the game where he talked about United's passing. He said they were too eager, right? And he was part of that, by the way, right? So when it got desperate, they forgot about the control and they started chucking loads of crosses in. 40 crosses yesterday. That's not the game plan, right? That's not how they want to play. They panicked, and maybe some of the panic is about the changing system, evolution. Maybe some of the panic was they just weren't fit enough, so they were just chucking stuff in there. Or they haven't played together. This pretty much a brand new set of players. Well, some new players, right, especially in central midfield. And so I think there's the reason why I'm happy to create some mitigation while voicing some concerns is that I think some of the things are fairly obvious and we should be able to fix them, right? It's still a group of players that finished third last season. Went on a tear in the second half of the season. I know some data nerds will be going, oof, they overperformed their data. But at the same time, they are trying to move on. We've got Carlos Blaber to come back in, who will give us legs in midfield. They've identified a problem, and they've spent money to try and solve it. It's not right now. It wasn't against Hull. And so I look at all of it and go, yeah, shit performance. I wish they'd turned those 40 entries into the box into good chances, because most of those 21 shots were very low quality chances. And I wish they'd taken the good quality chances they had. You know, Brian and Mbumo running through and stuck that in the top corner. The narrative would have changed quite a lot about that game if United had just had taken one of their chances to clear a set piece. The narrative would change quite a lot. Quick word from our sponsor, Claude. It can't fix United's transfer business or sort a result out at Hull, but it can help with quite a bit else. Here's a scenario for you. It's 11:30 on the Saturday night. The post-match reaction pod is recorded. There's a transcript, some show notes, and 3 clips to cut, as well as the full pod to edit. And there's that Substack piece I really wanted to post next week, but I haven't edited yet. I've been hosting NQAT for 17 years now, and most of the grunt work has never really got any quicker. But now I can hand off quite a bit of the workload to Claude before I go to bed. It's my collaborator, and it actually understands my entire workflow and can think with me. So whether you're debugging code or editing videos and writing Substack pieces like me, Claude can extend your thinking to tackle problems that really matter to you. It handles the serious stuff too. For example, give it 3 years of United's club accounts, ask what's changed in the wording of the footnotes, and it's going to find it in seconds. I can still check every number before it reaches any kind of microphone or any words reach a page. Try Claude Cowork today, claude.ai/NQAT. That's claude.ai/NQAT. Now back to the show. Do we want more and a better performance? Absolutely. Are there some issues with moving to evolving the system? I think so. But are the players sharp yet? I just really don't see it. I don't think, you watch Yuri Tielemans and Matheus Cunha yet. You can't tell me they're fully fit. They're clearly not, right? Yeah. And I know Tielemans is not express anyway, but he was running through treacle yesterday. And same with Cunha. He just couldn't do anything right at all. And clearly they are not ready. Yeah. And we're having some World Cup hangover. And I feel like we've got 2 games, then the international break. Let's assess it in November before we start talking about the sky falling in. Our view should be, it was crap against Hull, not it was crap against Hull and clearly United is shit and we need to sack the manager. Oh, and the stuff that irks me most, right, are people with very large platforms who, Brent is the side, of course he's going to be negative. We know they're going to do that. And Neville and his lads now teamed up with Brent will do the same thing as well because we know that's what sells. There's a business model there. But fans who have an agenda to say, hey, I really know what's going on the inside, they don't. And I know it's all going to go wrong in the future. They don't, right? And I think we should ignore that kind of stuff and focus narrowly on the performance yesterday, which wasn't what we wanted, but it doesn't mean it's catastrophic.
I don't want to be the negative Jiminy Cricket on his shoulder here about it, because I agree with everything that you're saying. The issue is always going to be whether or not, because we speak about these games on an individual basis, we track everything on a game-by-game basis, sometimes more than one episode per game, where we talk about all these things. So we evaluate it all in the detail of, through the lens of wanting it to change. The danger is always going to be that you don't see the evidence of change. And you mentioned certain reasons yesterday for where United were struggling, but there's also the emotional capacity. You get through to the last half an hour, it's going to be difficult for those players to be in that emotional space. And this isn't an excuse, but imagine being there, you're 2-0 down against Hull, you know you're going to get pelters from the press, you know exactly what the narrative's going to be. You know that it's piling pressure on the manager straight away. It influences everything that you're doing then. It influences the speed of what you're doing, the composure of what you're doing. Carrick spoke about that after the game. I think he's a little bit too optimistic after the poor results, but I understand why at this moment in time. I understand why he's got to be like that. I don't think it serves any purpose to send any rockets at this moment in time. So I can see why he's stressing the sort of consistency message. So from the perspective of we've been here again, this is difficult for us to sort of navigate this next 20 minutes because really we know we're not coming back into this. They're putting all of their 11 men back in. They will make it difficult for us in open play, and they've got no impetus and no need to come out and attack. They're just going to defend what they've got, and rightly so. A thoroughly deserved win for Hull, by the way. While we're saying all this, we can't shy away from that. So even with all the stats, you can't argue on the basis that they scored 2 perfectly good goals and we were rubbish. Now, the balance to that, the negative balance to that is we have been here so many times, and the he doesn't dismiss the concerns that we do have. And I'm not talking about the nonsense of the Brents and the world like that, because we saw the performative bollocks that goes on for just what I saw a clip of it, and I've tried to mute everything, even all the overlap. I've tried to get rid of it all this season, but I still saw something slip through the net about him. He's just reacting to a goal, and there's the performance aspect of it, which is not a genuine reaction to a goal being conceded. And the genuine reaction to a goal being conceded is, oh, for fuck's sake, here we are again. Because you don't want to think that. You want to be thinking the optimistic side. You want to be saying, all right, Carrick's here, things are changing, the players that we're buying are bringing something we didn't have, and that's going to fix a lot of the problems. This is it's an intricate point, so bear with me while I'm talking about it, because I don't want you to just jump in and necessarily just disagree with the face of what I'm saying. We can praise the likes of the players who've been here a long time, and I've spoke about this on my socials already. The likes of Maguire and Shaw have been around a long time. They're valuable squad players now because of their experience. And they are a good influence and a good presence around the dressing room for what they bring in that aspect. But they are not a good presence in terms of relying on them to turn that kind of game around yesterday. You spoke about the players who should and shouldn't start that game. They were always going to start because they've had full summers, but they are the kinds of players. And Dogu, although I praised Sahai Evans last week on the pod, is the same kind of thing. There are certain players you shouldn't play in a game like that because you are playing a different kind of game, and those are those kind of players. United and Mazraoui probably another one. I'm not saying Dalot's a great option, but he's the obvious one to be in there because he brings something different.
Yeah. Maguire obviously wasn't fit, and he's only playing because Dalot was even less fit. So,
yeah, I know. Those are all the valid concerns that you were expressing before the game. But the difficulty that you're going to have, and why it's a valid concern to have, is that Maguire and Shaw have become both victims and symptoms of the underperformance. They struggle with it, and they are responsible for it. You can't shy away from either of those things. So when you see them for the upteenth season, starting the season, now here's the dichotomy that comes with those two players, and this is why I didn't want you to jump in there, so I'm glad you didn't, is that in the scenario where Michael Carrick took over, they're actually two of the most trusted players, two of the players that you can count on, because when the back's to the wall, they have a resilience about them that can go to ground zero and pull something out of the bag. They're really good like that. But when there are expectations on them to step up from a team that can qualify for the Champions League to challenging for the title, the kind of performances we're expecting them to get from the off yesterday, they're not capable of that jump. And that's not a slight on them. It's just not part of their composition as players. And we've learned that over the decade that we've had Shaw and over the 6-7 years that we've had Maguire. Now, since we lost against Spurs, that 6-1 defeat at the start of the season 6 years ago, there were concerns about Maguire, even though we'd only had him for a year, and we'd written off Luke Shaw to the point that Alex Tellez got brought in. And then, it might be someone else at that point, but Tellez and that we brought other players to sign in front of Maguire. That's the point I'm making, really. And you didn't expect Maguire and Shaw to be starting this many seasons as first choice. So their issue is always going to be that kind of, it's a really difficult thing for a new manager coming in. And this is the problem that we always say whenever you change a manager, is that they're going to have favourites that they rely upon straight away. And they will get attached to those players because they've relied on those players, and those players have pulled them through the mire. You can't say that Maguire and Shaw didn't do that last season. They did. Shaw played every game. Maguire was probably the best central defender that we had from January onwards. And I'm their biggest critic probably of both of those players, or at least among them. Oh, I can see I'm criticising them now, but I can't get away from the fact that they were both exemplary in attitude and performance and professionalism from January onwards last year. But the problem is going to be for Michael Carrick, and he's going to find that out very quickly, is that you can't count on those players to take the next step.
No, clearly not. Yeah.
But he doesn't know that, or maybe he should know that from his experience with them before. But the issue that he's going to be is that he is an emotional manager, and that's not a bad quality to have. But he's invested that trust in them. He's already got to be at a point where he's got to be clinical enough to go like, we do need that left back coming in the next week, and he's got to be a better player than. He's got to be a much better player than Luke Shaw. He can't be a rotation for him. He can't be to challenge a better run of form out of him. He's got to be a replacement for him.
I think there was some fairly good reporting from behind the scenes this week that said Michael Carrick had challenged the higher ups. Right, I think there's a narrative on social media which I talked about a fair bit, but it's only a representation of some of the wider fan base. That is that he's some kind of yes man and he's just there. And I don't know why there's this narrative. I think because he doesn't bang tables in press conferences and straight bats every answer, and he used to play for the club. But there's some kind of narrative that he's a yes man and won't challenge the higher ups. And I think that is not true. He has demanded action. That's part of the reason why the wallet came out this week and they're dumping £70 million on Carlos Baleba. If it was up to me, I would spend another 70 million on Lewis Hall today, and because he would fix a real problem. And I think Luke Shaw he's got to the point where he doesn't really have the legs. With that comes defensive mistakes, by the way. You saw it in the second half. He was trying to get on the outside of Rashford. What they tactically, what they tried to do in the second half is stretch Hull, and that's what you should do. Stretch them wide. So you should do against the 5 at the back, so they couldn't just camp in their own box, and you'd create spaces. And it didn't happen often enough. Rashford was very, very wide. He won't like that. That's not where he's best, but he did it. That's what he's asked to do, stand on the touchline. But when he comes inside, Shaw had the bomb on the outside, and it happened once. And it was a good move, actually. And so the criticism of Luke Shaw is he just doesn't have the legs to do it, and he's likely to get injured playing twice a week. And I think that's probably true, and United should go out and get the top talent that they've got, and they can afford it, right? They might not want to spend that money, but they can afford it. Sadly, I think what they'll actually do is buy a compromise, which is not a high-ceiling 19-year-old talent, although clearly they're looking at one there, but they'll probably buy a 27, 28-year-old sort of, not journeyman necessarily, but an Alex Telles type figure, hopefully better than Telles. And it won't be a long-term solution, it'll be a sticking plaster. Maguire's a different issue, and I think you're right that Carrick is attached to him. I was worried about Maguire in pre-season and how he looked like he'd aged over the summer.
Yeah.
Like some of the symptoms of being older. Lenny Yoro was probably our best defender in pre-season. He's unlucky to not get a game. Maybe the thinking was that Heaven had to start, and Yoro and Heaven against a passionate Hull side would be a problem. The inexperience might show, or maybe he's just over-attached to Maguire. I don't know. Yoro deserved a place, didn't get it, so it's definitely a question mark. While we're on players, individuals, because I did want to get to that, there's a few others, like Mbumo played wide right. He'd been playing through the centre all pre-season, basically, except for the Milan game, which was a disaster. Cunha had bits and pieces of pre-season and played one game up front against Milan. Looked like he was running through treacle. It had caused United tactical problems where they all dropped into the same spaces. Exactly the same thing happened against Hull. I thought it was a pretty bad mistake from Carrick. I've mentioned the Dorgu issue already, which Carrick did noticed and fix. He's very polite about Dorgu afterwards. But there are some individual problems, and obviously Yuri Tielemans looked way off it. That is not the level of performance I expect from him. I think it will get a lot better. He played a few nice balls. He missed one from Rashford, actually, which was interesting. Rashford stood wide, made a brilliant out-to-in run. None of the Hull defenders picked him up. Tielemans played it so late that it was ahead of him. And well, we expect higher quality from him. So I thought individually there were some errors from Carrick and some poor performances. Bruno, I thought he was in his kind of hero ball phase. He was better actually when he moved back to 8, and he had to be a bit calmer. Statistically, you'll look at him, he probably gets really high ratings on all the apps because he played a lot of balls and created 3 or 4 chances in the game. Don't think it was his best performance by any means. Andre Santos, I thought, actually did pretty well. I was surprised he was taken off, but they took a risk. Probably because we needed control. Mainu should have started, and he probably would have done if he had more than, what did he have, 20 minutes of pre-season? Something like that? Yeah. So there are some issues. I think there's some ways that can be fixed. You're right to call out Shaw and Maguire. Shaw, we haven't got a replacement for. Maguire, we do. De Ligt's back in training. We'll see whether it's him or it should have been Yoro. I mean, they should just trusted the kids there, because Yoro and Heaven are clearly our two best defenders in pre-season. So.
Yeah. By the way, just to circle back on Maguire and Shaw before I move on, it was the lazy point out, because you always start with Shaw and Maguire, but I think sometimes you do that because it's so glaringly obvious, and where it's glaringly obvious for us, and you rotate through these managers so quickly. This is the issue with so much transition in such a short space of time, is that you do have this issue where managers will favour these kind of players and rely upon them, and then that ultimately, in the long term, causes some kind of issue for them down the road, and you can't allow too many of those incidents to happen, is what I'm saying. Now, the other players, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I'm thinking of the stats that I was looking at yesterday, and Tielemans had favourable stats. All of the numbers were very high, close to 100% pass completion, I think. Might have even been 100% pass completion. 49, something like 49 passes played. More than half of them played in holes off. So, like I said, that you can look at the numbers and go, like, do you know what? That actually looks like a decent performance there. But on the eye test, you look at what United were doing. Obviously, it's not impressive that 30-odd passes were in holes off, because that's what the way the Hull were playing. All of the play was
game
in
state,
holes off. So, especially when they went 2-0 up, but they didn't. If that sounds like I'm criticising their performance, I'm not, because they had every entitlement to do what they were going to do after scoring 2 goals. It was on United to come up with solutions. I wasn't as impressed with Santos as you. I think there's teething problems in the midfield. I just don't think it's an obvious fit yet. That might be because they've not had a run together in a proper game. So we'll see. Obviously those kind of things will sort themselves out. How that tethers itself to Bruno as well, because Bruno, it's not just about what's in front of him, it's about what's behind him, all the players that he's got to work around. You're quite right. Once he sort of got a little bit more responsible, a little bit more consistency came in the flow of his play. But yeah, maybe United were just hurt by a lot of things, like they've been hit fragmented throughout pre-season, and because Ahmad was injured, by the way, De Ligt, kind of concerningly, still listed officially as injured by the club on the club's official website yesterday. That was the noted reason for his absence, so that's a bit strange. But
he's only just back on the grass. I mean, he's got a month. He's got a month until he's ready, basically.
I know, but it was just a turn of phrase. I was surprised by them putting in there. But it might have just been a turn of phrase. So there were individual moments of concern there, and maybe it is to do with the fact that it's all been staggered returns, and Ahmad getting injured, and Sesko not having any minutes, and the decision of when to put him onto the pitch and all that, because there's no.
He missed 2 great heading chances, by the way. Sesko did, which, I mean, again, details, right? Rashford put in one cross. It was a really good move, actually. That Sesko just missed the header, and I think peak Sesko jumps higher than anyone in football, basically. He would have put that away.
Yeah.
Details, yeah. And he wasn't fit. He hasn't played at all, Sesko. Yeah.
Well,
this also is him getting back. First minute since May.
The combinations on the pitch, I spoke about Mazraoui earlier, but Mbeumo needs that player getting on the outside of him, do you know?
Well, wider point here, Wayne. It is a real problem that all of our forwards want to tuck inside, and we haven't got any fullbacks who either have the legs with Shaw or the quality Dalot, or a little bit of both, maybe Mazraoui, to get forward on the outside, right? Otherwise, it becomes very predictable and congested in the middle. It is an issue for United, right? It's part of the reason why everyone's saying, hey, we need a left back. It's not just that Shaw was starting for United in 2015. It's that tactical problem as well, because whether you play Rashford or Cunha on the left-hand side, or sometimes Dorgu, who's really has to be in a reactive game, You want someone going on the outside, otherwise they can just all tuck in and make it congested.
Yeah. Well, while I'm saying that, and while I also called out Shaw and Maguire earlier, let's not discount or discredit the fact that they can play in certain games and thrive in certain games and work in combinations with different players. I just think yesterday, because of the nature of the fragmented way that the pre-season's gone and the way that we've got certain players available, it's forced Carrick's hand in what was available to use, and what's unfortunately ultimately what we ended up with was a collection of players from the start who were real suited to play together as well. You know, like Mazraoui and Mbumo. Mbumo likes that. He likes an overlapper, even if it's Ahmad or Dalot, because it enables him to do different things. When he plays through the middle, he likes playing with Casemiro, and he liked playing with Mainu because they could find pockets of space together to find his runs. He likes playing with Martinez because Martinez tries them searching passes for Mbumo. And we didn't have any of that yesterday, which is, you know, that's just one of those things, really. And it goes to say that the stats that back up Carrick's incredible run of form at the back end of last season do somewhat play into the narrative that, you know, we had only one game a week. It was pretty much an 11 or 12-man squad that he was picking every week. And maybe a few more than that, maybe 14 or 15 that he was picking from. But it was a very close-knit group of players that he wanted there. And when they were all there, United were playing their most effective football, not always pretty. So when you don't have all of those players available, or when you're asking more of those players to do something different, when we've already got enough evidence that they can't provide that, that's when the concerns come in. And we all know that United needed a lot of strengthening this summer. It's either they bring in the bodies or they try and play it smart, and they've tried to do the latter. And it's not necessarily a bad window yet. We were umming and ahhing about that on the last time we spoke, but Belieber makes it a lot better. Another defender makes it a lot better than that. And then another forward makes it the icing on the cake, which it doesn't look like it's going to happen at this moment in time. But within all of that, because it's happened in the last week of August, you've still got to now work on getting all those combinations right. And yesterday it didn't look like Tielemans and Santos were the right fit in midfield. They were the two that he had to pick because they were the two who played, and they were the ones who were ready. I think over the course of the season, Tielemans and Santos will probably play together, and they'll play much better and much more effectively than that. That's got to be an obvious point to make from that. These are the, you know, it just depends on what your objectives are. United are going to lose plenty more games this season, of football this season. They're going to be embarrassed again this season because it's still a work in progress. They're not a team who are ready for the championship push that we wanted them to be. They're not a squad ready for that. What we need to see, and I think we can see that, or we can at least see evidence of that throughout the season, is whether we've got a manager who's got the conviction and the ruthlessness to take us to the next level. It's difficult at this moment in time to say that he's not ruthless, because I'm talking about trusting players, and you don't just cut a player out to demonstrate ruthlessness to prove a point of being ruthless, because you're still got to trust those players. But he's also got to have the intelligence to know what's for his own good. We know some of that because we're long season suffering supporters, but ultimately he knows those players better because he's spent more time with them, and if he trusts them to play, they've got to fail in front of him, and they did that yesterday. Can we talk about Rashford? That'd be an interesting one to talk about.
Rashford, he had 45 minutes. He had sort of, what did he have, 20 against Milan, something like that, in which there were a few bright moments. 45 against Hull, there were a few moments. It's very clear what he was asked to do. Stay very wide, stretch Hull, take on players. It was semi-effective, I thought. Not brilliant. I don't know if he got a shot off. I can't remember. He didn't get inside very much. He was very much trying to take on the wide players. What did you make of his performance then? And I guess the presumption that he's staying for the season.
Well, first of all, like I said, I was in the Bishop Blaze watching that, and he came on at half time, and there was universal welcome for him, as I can make out was the same in the away end at Hull. So I think he was welcomed back with open arms. There wasn't a dissenting voice, even when he was frustrated in the second half, and he was, because it's the same old Rashford. He hasn't magically changed overnight. There wasn't a sense of patience running out with him, even though they could easily be very quickly. And that brings me to the point, really, because I think it was the same old Rashford, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I think there were times when he did what he was asked to do. He was hugging the left, and then he was trying to make an impact. He made one telling contribution, which was the cross for Sesko. I think he did get a shot off that went straight at the goalie. It might not have been him actually, but I thought it was him. He was below par. He was better than Dogu, a million miles better than Dogu. The ball was low for that. I just think you look at Rashford and you look at the fact he's not going to be any different to the end of the season. This is where I'm split on this, because the romantic in me wants to say he comes back and he proves everyone wrong. But you have to look at what use he is to United first and foremost, and his most prominent use is going to be like he was yesterday, right? He's going to be an impact sub. He's going to be someone who either is there to alleviate the pressure on playing Sesko every week, or provides a different option in the cup games to give those forward players a rest, or he's called upon in situations like yesterday where Carrick's out of ideas and he's put Rashford on, which I don't think was the case yesterday. I think
I don't think he was out of ideas. He was solving a particular problem. So he made a mistake
yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday's a different kettle of fish. What I'm talking about is further down the line, like saying October or November, the months you'll talk about when it gets a little bit grittier. If we're in that similar situation and he's turning to Rashford with 20 minutes to go to pull back a couple of goals, I'm not saying that's fair on Rashford, because that's never been the kind of player that he is. He's never been an impact kind of player, apart from when he started those games at the very start of his career. And so you're asking things of him, and if he doesn't deliver those things like he didn't yesterday, there's no particular criticism on Carrick or Rashford for that. I'm just saying the fact of it was brought on at half time and we were 2-0 down, and we lost the game 2-0, and Rashford contributed little, because that's the way that the game ended up, is that there is the sense, at least, it's just I won't be like this, but I can see a pattern emerging where the tide turns very quickly and it becomes poisonous, because that's the poison chalice that you're playing with when you brought him back, right? Because it all has to go swimmingly for a period of time. And I think there's good faith response from the United faithful. And this is very admittedly, by the way, on the back of us losing to Hull and feeling a bit reactionary about this and just feeling cautious and a little bit sick of the same old kind of things. Not sick in terms of like, oh, I'm sick of this, but sick in the terms of like, do we really want to go through all this again? I don't like the way that this might go. I can foresee a situation where this happens, where we rely on Rashford to do things that he's not renowned for doing. He doesn't do those things. It looks like a wrong gamble from Carrick, and the tide of emotion turns very quickly against him and against Solskjaer, against Carrick, as it did for Solskjaer. Like when it becomes that emotional, as we are all emotionally involved and connected to this in such a way, because Carrick's a legend of the club and because Rashford is so emotionally woven, whether you love him or hate him, that there's a volatility there, right? And when you are a volatile state where United are as a team right now, you're not quite sure where they're going to go. Adding that into the mix, I don't know if that's a worthwhile exercise for anyone. I don't know anyone who benefits. I mean, the potential for it to go well, I don't know what that is. I don't know if you'd say it's a 50-50 chance. I don't think it is. I don't know,
Well, what's well, Wayne? I think my pushback on some of this stories, I understand what you're saying, right? You can create a case. One can create a case in one's head that this could go badly. His performances aren't great. The results are middling, and everyone blames it on Rashford and gets frustrated with it because he comes with baggage, right? Yeah, sure, absolutely. That is a scenario that could happen. I don't think that's a scenario that we should invent because of 45 minutes against Hull. I mean, I was just looking at the data while you were talking. He created 4 chances. He created the most chances in the game. Now, Were they good chances? Not really. The one for Sesko, I think, should have been put away. I think a lot of people haven't seen how he played at Barcelona, honestly, and he was pretty good last season. Hansi Flick wanted to keep him. The Suits said no, for whatever reason. Well reported, and if you don't believe me, Andy Mitten has said the same. I wrote a whole piece about him. 3,000 words. You can go check out on my Substack if you want, in which my conclusion really is it's probably better for Rashford and for the club to move on. But, ... right? The finances actually came to the point where keeping him made more sense than buying another player. Because, what player on the planet can you get that is going to... He got 28 goals and assists last season. You can dismiss it. One can dismiss it. I'm not saying you. One can dismiss that if you want and say La Liga, whatever. But there's no player on the planet that you can get that is going to get you that many goal involvements that would be for the 25 million, that around about 25, 30 million. If you take Rashford's wages, you'd have to buy wages, even if you halved the wages, and purchase a player for 25, 30 million or so. There's no player on the planet that's going to get you that. Right. The alternative is Cunha. We love Cunha for all sorts of reasons, of course, but there's going to be different game states where you want different options. And if it's not Rashford, it's then Dorgu, who... I'm not dismissing the guy. I think he has many qualities. He scored a couple of brilliant goals against Arsenal and City last season. But he's not a small spaces player. He's not a player that you bring into a game against a team that's camped in their own box. He's just not, right? And I thought that was a misprofiling yesterday, or he didn't have any choices, Carrick, right? Given Ahmad's injury and lack of fitness of certain other players. But he's never in his career, not once ever, going to get anywhere close to 28 goals and assists in the season. I'd take a bet with anybody right now. It just won't happen over the next 10 years. As much talent as he has, he's not that kind of player, right? And he was bought for Amorim to play at left wing back because he's a multifaceted player who can do a bit of defending and a bit of attacking, and is a great athlete.
No,
and so the wider point was about Rashford and where he fits in the squad and the team and our strategy. And I don't want to freak out about it yet. I know there's baggage with him, and that's kind of why my conclusion was probably best for him to move on. He probably wanted that as well because he knows that he is the lightning rod, and if it goes wrong for United, likelihood is that there will be a lot of people pointing at him. And I don't know whether you saw in midweek. Neville asked about Rashford on the overlap, and Carragher said, "Oh God, can't we move on? He's a good player for United. Let's stop talking about him." And Marcus on Twitter was like, "Yes, please, can I get my head down and just play the game?"
But
right.
I also want to counter this because I did notice that's what prompted me to mute the overlap because I was sick of Carragher did this before with Rashford. A year ago, he said or a year or 18 months ago, he said he's not good enough to warrant talking about this often. Which I thought was
that's Carragher, yeah. I mean,
no, he's another. He's also like he speaks in such hyperbolic statements about United players. He's done it before with Casemiro, obviously. It's disgusting the way that he said that because I mean, he's your topic of conversation on Sky Sports. That's what happens, and we are talking about him because he's such an high-profile player and because he's such an emotional player. And for the record, as I'm saying all this, I love Rashford, right? I thought it was brilliant what he did last season at Barcelona. And I think everything he's done throughout his career, using his profile, I don't care about the disciplinary issues that caused a bit of a disagreement with him and Ten Hag, or like the different relationships that he's had at United. Those are regrettable. I'm sure he regrets them as well. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe they're just part of like his makeup or whatever. Maybe it's just part of.
No. I don't. I think. Sorry to interrupt. I think he's recognised that. I don't particularly have any inside information. I've had spoken to a lot of people about what happened, and some of the problems were pretty serious. But he was in a different environment that changed a lot. He didn't have issues at Barcelona. He was 2 minutes late for one training session. Hansi Flick had a very strict policy in which if you're late for a training session, you miss the next game. That happened to 4 different players at Barcelona last season. Could you name the other 3? No, you couldn't, because there weren't stories written about them.
Because he's the lightning rod, right? That's why it creates a bigger storm when something gets mentioned. It shouldn't do. It's pathetic, but it is nonetheless part of the case. And I don't know if what he brings as a player, I agree with you 1,000,000%. It doesn't matter how high I was on Dogu last week. There's still horses for courses. I will still say he's a very, very raw player. And there are certain games where he doesn't thrive, and certain games where he does. That's obvious. If I say that I think he's going to be a great player, if I speak wildly of his potential, I'm talking about the player I think he could become, not the player that he is now. Right? So I completely agree
and I hope you're right, of course. You know,
right. And
I hope he becomes a brilliant player for United. Yeah.
Completely agree with your assessment of Rashford. He should have started, and he should have been the player to come on, and he was the right player in that moment in time and everything like that, considering the players that we've got and the options that we have. I definitely don't want to do it, invent or create a narrative where I'm like, oh, this could happen, invent the idea of a storm in my head. I'm just looking at, in the isolated picture of what happened yesterday, knowing what I know about the English media, knowing the kind of things that they like to vulture on, feast on like vultures, and I look at it and I think United they are sometimes architects of their own downfall, where they make that narrative easy to follow. I don't know if what we get from Rashford this season is worth it for him or for us. We might be in a case where we don't have a choice, right? We might be in a case where he doesn't have a choice and we don't have a choice, so we have to deal with it and proceed in the best kind of way. And then what do? You've got to play him, you've got to use him, you've got to try and utilise that talent, because there is a lot of talent there. All I'm doing at this moment in time is expressing my doubt that I don't think that these kind of things rarely work. I want it to work. I want it to be the biggest exception to the rule that creates new thoughts of these kind of things happening, like Grealish going back to City and things like that. I think things like this can work out. I want that to happen. I specifically want it to happen for Rashford. I don't think it will. I don't think he's... Also, I don't know if we've got the right role for him to give him the best chance to do that. And that's another point that I want to make, that if he's the player, the impact player coming in to do that, or the number 9 that he doesn't like playing, that caused an issue in the first place, all of those issues still remain. Can he be that player? I don't know if we've got the right scenario for him to flourish. And I feel like in footballing careers, managerial careers, playing careers, where time is so limited and narratives can be woven and storms can be directed and blown out of all proportion, I think when you've got all of the elements there to create that, it's best not to have them for all parties. And I don't know. It's just a concern that I have based on yesterday. But I will say, that's just a concern. And it's a concern that I thought was valid enough to have a conversation about. But I will say, he was completely 100% welcome back. No one got on his back throughout the process, or at least not where I was sitting in the Bishop Blaze, and not from my understanding the away end. If he plays on Sunday against Ipswich, Old Trafford will welcome him back 100%. I can't guarantee that no one will get on his back if he makes a mistake, because you can't guarantee those things, but I think that there'll be good faith in welcoming him back and wanting him to do good things. All of those elements are there. Yeah. It's just my doubt on whether or not I think it's the right thing to do.
I understand.
Whether or not it can be a factor in how quickly things unravel if things don't go well.
Sure, yes, but there is cause and symptom. He is not the cause of United's problems right now. No. And we'll see how the season unfolds. Of course, you talked about good faith. There are some very bad faith people out there who would like it to go wrong because it suits them. Some of them in traditional media. Some of them, unfortunately, are owned by Gary Neville now. So him and the overlap will spend way too long talking about Marcus Rashford. They'll do a tactical breakdown on him. And Brent, who is now part of that stable because the overlap, Global, the media company, bought that, is entirely based on anger and driving negative narratives. I mean, it sells, right? That is the social media world. Politicians know it, and football analysts know it. Anyway, after all that freak out, we do have another game next week, so we'll be back in midweek to preview that. As I said at the beginning, I don't think the sky is falling in. I know the problems. I think we saw some of the challenges. Let's slow our roll on. It's all a disaster and everything's going to go wrong. It's not about you. It's about everyone else out there. It's not me trying to be overly positive, or as someone called me on YouTube, delusional. I don't think we need to all freak out quite so much based on one result. Very disappointing though it was. We have, I'm going to sound like a player here, but there's a chance to rectify these things this week. I hope they know what the problem is. Of course, the concern is that they don't. But we'll find out when we got Ipswich at Old Trafford next weekend. It could have been the return of Kieran McKenna. It was not. He walked away from Ipswich and it's Gary O'Neill in charge instead. Interesting choice from McKenna there. I guess he's looking for his next job up. Maybe they should bring him back to Old Trafford to provide some of his tactical brilliance. Could definitely do with a set-piece coach. Could definitely do with that. One of the only elite teams to not have one. But anyway, a chance to solve all of that in the week to come. Catch our Patreon. Patreon.com/NQATpod if you want to get the extra show, or if you hate the adverts on here, you can get this ad-free, at least in audio. Thank you, Wayne, for a lively debate.
No worries.
Very good. Catch you all next time, everyone. Thank you. Bye now.